Hi crafters, this is Cindy B with mrsbscraftroom.blogspot.com, here today with another video in our series. And today I thought it was time for another scrapbook layout. I took my grandchildren to the local pumpkin patch this past weekend, and I had some pictures that I needed to scrap, so I thought, let's make a pumpkin patch layout. So, using my gypsy, I have started with, let's zoom in a little bit. With the gypsy, I have used the first layer, or the first mat, as my layout design for my layout. So you'll notice I've got two big squares here. Those are from Georgian Basic Shapes, and I basically sized those. Those both are sized at 6.87 by 6.41. I made two of those and just put them in each corner, the upper left-hand corner and the lower right-hand corner. Then I wanted to have the words pumpkin patch across the, let's see if I can zoom in on that, across the top of the page. And so I found, using the cartridge Opposites Attract, I was able to come up with two different types of font. So the first font is, let's go into the, okay, so Opposites Attract. The first font is from, it's the, let's see, it's called the Opposite font. So there we go. So I went ahead and I used the font that's called the Opposite font, and I spelled out the word pumpkin, brought that back to my mat, and I wanted the words to be welded together so it would cut all in one piece. So when it came to my screen, it wasn't welded at the time. Let me get it back to what it probably looked like. Probably came on something like that. So I wanted to be able to, weld the words together. So what I did is I highlighted each word, each of the letters, and then under the Advanced tab with the kerning tool, I selected that kerning tool, and then I proceeded to scooch the letters together until they were all touching. So if I zoom in a little bit more, you should be able to see where the letters are touching, and then I would hit the weld button, and then when I use the eyeball, I could see exactly where they were welded and make sure that they were welded the way I wanted them to be, and they are. Okay, so I'll take that off. Now, for the second word, for the word patch, I also used the cartridge Opposites Attract, and this particular one is using the upright font. This is a really cool font cartridge. If you don't have it and you're interested, it may be something that you're interested in. It's got a couple of different fonts on here, so it's really nice. So when I brought that back to the main page, again, let's go back out and then zoom in once. It was, let's see, it was separated like that. So if you can see that each letter was separate from one another. The really cool thing about this font, when you do use the kerning tool and bring those together, it, oops, I don't know what I just did. Kerning. It makes a, when they come together, they look in cursive, like in cursive writing. So then I would get them where they were touching, and I would zoom in on that to make sure that they weren't going too far up and that they were touching properly, and then hit the weld button and use the little eyeball again, and we'll see how it looks. There we go. It turned out great. Okay, so let's go back. So what I did is, my plan is to, when I cut out the word pumpkin and patch, is to layer the word patch on top of the word pumpkin. There we go. So, so that was used from the Opposites Attract cartridge. Then going down to the lower left part of the screen, I have the fence that I brought in from the Old West cartridge. I have two pumpkins that I brought in from Everyday Paper Dolls. Now this particular pumpkin has a face on there, and I didn't want to cut those faces, so I highlighted the image And using the hide contour feature, I was able to, I'll just show you real quick, was able to hide, let's see if we can get that to go, was able to hide the little facial features. So I'll go back and hide those so we can, whoops, show. There we go. So now he'll cut without his face. All right, so I've copied that and made 2 copies. Now I wanted one pumpkin to be behind the fence and one in front of the fence, so I kind of positioned those that way. And then I thought, you know, when we were at the pumpkin patch, they also had apples that we picked. So I thought it would be fun to put a little basket of apples. So this particular basket came from Doodle Charms, and then I have some apples that I put inside the basket there. If you can see that, it's kind of all globbed together. And then the leaves also came from Doodle Charms. So now that I have my basic layout idea created, I then want to go and create the pieces on each mat to cut out. So I created the layer 2, and this is where I've put my fence, the fence layers, my word pumpkin, the word patch, and my pumpkins themselves. I'm going to cut 2 out of orange and 2 out of green to layer, because the Everyday Paper Dolls does not have a layering feature, so I'll layer those myself. And then the mat 3 has the leaves from Doodle Charms, and I wanted to cut my leaves in 3 different colors, so I separated those into sections on different sections of the mat, so when I put my paper on, I can cut different colors of leaves. Same thing with the apple. I wanted 2 red and 1 green, so I separated those. And then the basket is down here in the lower left-hand corner with its layers. So that's basically it. And if we go back to the main page, the big squares here, I just cut those manually. It was just easier to cut, and I think I actually ended up cutting them at 6 3/4 by 6 1/2 to fit on the mat. So, all right, I'm going to go off and cut my pieces, and I will be back in a moment, and we'll put this layout together. Okay, so we have all of our pieces cut out. This is what our pumpkin word turned out to be. And then the word patch, which I'm going to layer over that like that when we do the layout. And let's see, the fence. And I went ahead and applied the layers. And I did add some chalk to my fence just to give it a little bit of depth on the, you know, to make it look, I don't know, a little bit more real. But I did go ahead and apply the layers. Here are my pumpkins, and I did go ahead and what I did in order to layer them, because they don't have layers, on the orange, I just cut the orange stem off, and then I cut the orange tendrils off the bottom, and then glued the orange on top of the green so that the green stuck out. And then using chalk, I just highlighted some of the edges and the lines that were already there. And then the same thing on the leaves. I just highlighted with chalk each of the leaves. Let's see, and then the basket of apples, same thing, I just highlighted with the apples. Now I didn't cut multiple layers of the apples out because they were so small. So I just took a brown marker and I colored the cardstock to create the stem, and then a green marker to create the leaf. So that seemed to work out pretty well. Okay, so now for the, the squares. I ended up just cutting my squares, and I'm pretty sure I cut them at 6 by 6 1/2. And then when I laid them on the page, I thought, you know, they look kind of plain. So what I ended up doing is getting another piece of cardstock and cut it a little bit bigger than the square, and used a border punch, if you can see the scallop, the border punch on the top and the bottom of that. And then using my sewing machine, I zigzag stitched around the two and adhered those together. You can see the stitching better on the back. So that's what we've created. So now we're going to go ahead and put together our layout. All right.